I never expected her to remember my name, let alone everything else. The corner cafe smelled like steamed milk and day-old croissants, the kind of place where people came to be alone together. I slid into my usual seat by the window, the one with the scratched wooden ledge that caught crumbs and sunlight alike. I've been coming here for months, mostly to escape my apartment, the hum of my laptop, and the silence that waited for me at home. She was already there, of course, though I didn't know that until I glanced up. Her hair had that soft silver sheen in the morning light, tucked loosely behind one ear, a few strands escaping like they didn't care about being proper. She smiled at the barista, then looked up and met my eyes for a fraction too long before turning away. That fraction burned. "Latte?" she asked, as if reading my thoughts. Yeah, the usual," I said because I hadn't thought anyone noticed. She nodded, smiled again, and left. I watched her hands, long, careful, not unlike mine when I tried to fold a napkin just so, trail along the counter. I thought about how ordinary that movement was and how easily it made my stomach tighten. I'd first seen her at my friend's barbecue, a blur of laughter and perfume, someone I assumed was untouchable. My friend's mom. The thought still made me stiffen, even now, sitting across from her in this sunlit cafe. It shouldn't feel like this, not with her standing decades ahead of me in life, but it did. I scrolled through my phone, half expecting a text I wouldn't send. Empty drafts sat there like quiet echoes of my own hesitation. Coffee in hand, I watched her move between tables, offering nods to familiar faces, the kind of casual authority that didn't demand attention but got it anyway. My eyes flicked to her again, to the subtle crease near her mouth when she laughed at someone else's joke. The barista set my latte in front of me, and she had already returned to her own table, flipping a small notebook open. I wanted to ask her something, anything, but my words got stuck behind my teeth. Instead, I stirred my coffee slowly, watching the swirls of cream spiral down like they were carrying secrets I wasn't meant to know. "Hey," she said suddenly, and I jolted. Her voice was quiet, casual, but there was a weight to it. "Did you finally try the blueberry scone here?" I hesitated. Not yet." My voice sounded stranger than I intended. She smiled, tapping the notebook with one finger. "You should. It's worth it. And you always seem like you need a little something." Her eyes lingered on mine for just a beat too long. I cleared my throat. "Thanks. I'll try it next time." We both went silent then. Not awkwardly. Exactly. More like the kind of silence that feels full but fragile. I noticed her flick her eyes to her hands as she traced a margin in her notebook, and I imagined her folding a napkin with the same kind of careful attention when no one was looking. Minutes passed, or maybe it was just one, and she stood, gathering her bag. "See you around," she said, with the faintest tilt of her head, like a promise that might be real or might not. I watched her walk out, the door swinging shut behind her, leaving the cafe a little emptier, my chest a little tighter. My thumb hovered over my phone, unsent messages waiting for courage I didn't have, and then it buzzed, startling me. A text, unknown number. "Forgot to give you this back. Thought you might want it. M." I stared at the screen, my latte untouched, the cream now cold, swirling quietly. And just like that, everything shifted. I saw her again a few days later, in the same cafe. She was tucked into the corner with her notebook, headphones dangling around her neck like she'd just paused some music to notice me. I hesitated by the counter, lingering over my usual, pretending I wasn't counting heartbeats. "You remembered the scone," she said, before I even ordered. I smiled nervously. "Yeah, your recommendation." She laughed softly, a sound that made the hum of the cafe sharper somehow. "Good. I was worried you'd hate it. Or worse, not even try." I sat across from her, our knees almost brushing under the table, and she handed me a sugar packet. A small gesture, almost nothing, but I felt it. My fingers brushed hers for a split second as I took it, and I thought I could hear the coffee cup spinning in my chest. "So, you live around here?" she asked casually, stirring her tea. "Yeah, a few blocks over," I said. I hesitated. "You?" "Same. I like the quiet mornings here." Her eyes lingered on the cup as if remembering something. Then, quieter. "It's peaceful. After everything." "Everything?" I asked because I wanted to know. but I didn't push. She shrugged, a small, self-contained movement. Divorce, you know. Life just shifts, and suddenly you're alone in a way you didn't expect. Her gaze flicked toward the window, then back. I guess some mornings are harder than others. I nodded, stirring my own coffee. I didn't tell her that I sometimes imagined what it would be like to just stay here with her, letting the words float between us. Or that I felt guilty for noticing how her laugh softened when she thought I wasn't looking. We sat in silence for a few minutes, neither filling the air, but both aware it existed, thick like fog. I found myself watching her hands again, long, steady, the way they curved around the mug. I pictured them helping with groceries, flipping through books, doing things small and ordinary, but intimate. You ever read anything that makes you feel like someone understands you? She asked suddenly. Her eyes lifted to mine. There was a softness there I didn't expect, a quiet invitation. Yeah, I said, slowly. Sometimes, I think a line from a book can be more than just words. Like it knows something I can't say. She smiled, and it was just a little, barely there curve, but it lingered. Her hand moved toward mine across the table, just close enough that the air between them seemed warmer. I felt a flicker of panic, then the absurdly grounding sense that I didn't want her to pull away. Instead, she tapped my wrist lightly with her finger, a small, teasing gesture. See, you're human after all, she said, her voice casual, but her gaze held something quieter, something that wasn't just a joke. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me, like the space I occupied in the world mattered more than I realized. Or maybe because I knew it was risky. Friend's mom, age difference, quiet warnings I shouldn't ignore, but for just a few breaths, none of that mattered. And as we sat there, tea cooling between us, I realized I wanted more than just coffee and polite conversation. I didn't see her for a week, and the cafe felt emptier without her. My routine, coffee at 8:15, window seat, scribbled notes in my journal, was suddenly hollow, like I'd been skipping a beat I didn't know existed. When she returned, she was carrying a grocery bag, her hair pulled back tighter than usual, and something in her shoulders made her seem smaller, cautious. I waved, and she hesitated before offering a slight nod. One of those gestures that meant hello, but also maybe stay away. I sat down across from her anyway. She sighed, a quiet sound that carried a weight. Busy week, she said, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. I nodded. Yes, same. My fingers drummed against the table. Restless, tried to ignore the way my pulse quickened every time our eyes met. She stirred her tea slowly, deliberately, and I noticed the slight tremor in her hand. Something was holding her back. Something I couldn't name. A laugh floated from the next table. One of my friends who'd wandered in unexpectedly. He waved, unaware of the tension, and I forced a smile, caught between greeting him and staying present with her. She didn't look up, didn't acknowledge him, but I could see her jaw tightening, subtle but real. We fell into silence again. Not uncomfortable exactly, too charged for that, but quiet like a taut string ready to snap. I wanted to reach across the table, touch her hand, ask if she was all right, but I didn't. My hesitation felt heavy, like I'd forgotten the rules of this space we were carefully carving out. You still reading that book? She asked after a pause. Her voice was softer now, the caution ebbing just slightly. I lifted it from my bag, fingers brushing the cover. Yeah, I keep coming back to it. I wanted to add why, how it made me think about her, but the words wouldn't come. She watched me, head tilted, and for a moment, the distance between us seemed smaller than it had any right to be. I thought about leaning closer, about the faint warmth of her shoulder brushing mine, the almost imperceptible scent of her perfume. My stomach tightened, caught between longing and the unspoken line we weren't supposed to cross. And then her phone buzzed. She glanced down, and the careful mask returned. I felt it, the retreat. A wall built quietly, brick by brick, between the space I'd thought we were sharing. I wanted to reach out, and for a heartbeat, I almost did. My hand hovered over hers, the air between us thick and impossible. We stared at each other, and I imagined just a little, just a fraction, if I leaned in, if she did too, if that hesitation broke. But I didn't. Her gaze flicked away, and the moment slipped like sand through fingers. She tucked her notebook into her bag and stood. "I should get going," she said, voice even but fragile. I swallowed hard, hands tightening around my coffee cup. I wanted to speak, to say something that would anchor her back to this table, to me, but all I could do was nod. And as she walked toward the door, I realized how much I wanted her to stop. She didn't come to the cafe for 2 days, or maybe 3. I stopped checking my phone, told myself I had other things to do, but every time I passed the corner where the morning sun hit just right, I found my pace slowing, hoping she might appear. I finally saw her that evening, sitting alone on a park bench. The late winter light hit her hair in a dull shimmer, and she wrapped her coat tighter around herself, as if trying to hold something in. I approached slowly, careful not to startle her. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than I meant. She glanced at me, eyes avoiding mine. "Hey," she murmured. Her fingers fiddled with the zipper of her bag, small, restless movements. We walked side by side along the path, silence stretching between us like a rope. I wanted to break it, to ask why she hadn't been at the cafe, to confess how much I'd missed her, but the words lodged in my throat. "You haven't been coming around," I said finally, not accusing, just stating what was obvious. Her gaze flicked up briefly, then away. "I needed space," she said, slow, careful. She paused, like the next words might undo something fragile. I swallowed. "Because of me." The question escaped before I could stop it. She stopped walking. Her breath hitched slightly, the cold air turning soft clouds between us. "I don't know," she whispered. I don't know what I'm doing anymore." I wanted to reach for her hand, wanted to tell her it was okay, that I understood, that I didn't care about rules or age or anything else. But I didn't. My hand stayed buried in my coat pockets, fingers trembling. We walked again, slower now, matching each step like we were negotiating the distance between us. I imagined things, I admitted quietly, things I shouldn't, about us. Her shoulders shifted, subtle, almost imperceptible, and I felt her pulse in the space next to me. "I think about that too," she said, voice low, as if speaking it aloud made it heavier. "But I can't let myself." I stopped. She stopped. I could see the way her eyes darted to my lips, then back up like she was testing the air between us, measuring the risk. The park around us felt empty. Even the distant hum of traffic softened into something private. I don't want to ruin anything," she admitted finally, voice breaking slightly. Her words stopped, clipped by hesitation. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to stop, that the risk was ours to take together, but all I did was step closer, careful, careful, careful. She exhaled slowly, the tension rolling off her shoulders in a shiver. Her eyes searched mine, and in that quiet I realized she was trembling. Not from cold, not really, but from something unspoken, something raw. I opened my mouth, then closed it, paused, and then she whispered, almost to herself, almost to me, "What if we can't stop?" The question hung in the air, unfinished, waiting. I thought I understood her. I thought the quiet pauses, the lingering glances, the small gestures, hand brushing mine over the coffee cup, the half smile when I said something stupid, meant something. But that afternoon, the rhythm shifted. I found her at the park again, sitting on the same bench, her bag open like she'd been rifling through it. Her face was soft, unreadable, and for a second I thought she'd just been waiting for me. But then her phone buzzed, and the name that lit the screen froze me. Emma. Her fingers trembled over it, and when she answered, her voice softened into something I didn't recognize, careful, tender, familiar in a way that wasn't meant for me. I froze a few steps back, pretending to tie my shoe, pretending not to listen, pretending I didn't feel the twist in my chest. She laughed quietly into the phone, a sound meant for someone else. And I realized I didn't know this part of her. Not the ex, not the memories, not the life she carried in the spaces between her smiles. The one she hadn't told me about, that made her pause, made her careful, made her hers already in ways I couldn't touch. The call ended, and she tucked her phone back in her bag, her hand lingering over the strap like it anchored something heavy. She looked up at me, eyes apologetic, quick, then back to the path ahead like I wasn't really there. I have to run, she said, voice flat like she'd rehearsed it. I'll see you soon. I nodded, heart thrumming too loud. I wanted to ask who she'd been talking to, why she hadn't mentioned it, what it meant, but the words died before they left my mouth. She had already walked away, coat swinging, bag bouncing against her side. I stood there for a long minute, staring at the space she'd occupied. Empty, quiet, like she'd never been there at all. My phone lay in my pocket, an unsent message burning in my drafts. Wait, tell me. I didn't send it. I didn't even open it again. Instead, I walked along the path, imagining 100 different scenarios. Her laughing with someone else, her hands holding another, the line between us fraying without notice. And every imagined scene felt both wrong and inevitable. When I returned to the cafe that evening, her seat was empty, her cup untouched, the scribbled notebook absent. I could almost hear the echo of her laughter, the brush of her fingers across the sugar packets, the pause she left behind. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence, leaving me stuck mid-thought, mid-step, mid-breath. And I realized that sometimes the hardest part wasn't losing her. It was realizing how little I really knew. I found her in the late afternoon, sitting on the kitchen stool at her apartment, half-finished cup of tea in front of her, light spilling across the counter like it knew we were about to do something risky. I didn't knock. I shouldn't have. Maybe, but something in me needed to be here to see her before the day ended without words between us. Hey, I said, voice low, careful. She didn't look up immediately, her hands wrapped around the mug like it held her steady. Hey, she said back soft. The pause stretched, almost unbearably long. I wanted to step closer. I wanted to ask her about Emma, about the park bench, about everything I'd imagined and feared. But the air was heavy with choice. Say it or stay quiet. Reach or retreat. I set my bag down slowly, deliberately, my fingers brushing the countertop, tracing the faint scratches there like I'd been here before, though I hadn't. I wasn't sure you'd come back, I admitted finally. My voice cracked just enough to betray the quiet panic behind it. She finally looked at me, eyes soft but wary. I wasn't sure either, she said, fingers loosening around the mug. There's a lot I haven't said. About my life, about things that might scare you off. I shook my head. I don't care. I just wanted to see you. That's all. My words sounded hollow even to me. But they were true. She shifted slightly on the stool, hands pressed in her lap. I was afraid you'd think it changes things. I stepped closer, careful to respect the invisible line she drew, but close enough that she could feel my presence. It doesn't, I said, voice quieter now, almost a whisper. Not really. Not if we just try to be honest. Her eyes flicked up, lingering on mine. I noticed the tension in her jaw, the small hitch in her breath. You make it hard to stay cautious, she admitted, the words barely audible. We sat like that, the apartment quiet except for the hum of the heater and the faint clink of her spoon against the mug. There was nothing grand, nothing cinematic except the way we existed in the same small space, both aware of the risk and the cost of what might be lost. I reached out, just a fingertip, and brushed it against her hand. Not holding, not demanding, just a small acknowledgement that I was here and that I wouldn't pull back. She didn't flinch. She let her hand stay, light and tentative under mine. She exhaled, a slow, almost imperceptible release, and whispered, Okay, okay. I echoed, a soft, quiet anchor to the fragile moment. And that was it. No grand gestures. No dramatic infestians. Just presence. Just acknowledgement. Just two people finally letting the other exist fully in their space. The tension didn't disappear. The future was still uncertain. But in that small, stolen gesture, everything that had been paused between us seemed to breathe again. The cafe still smelled like steamed milk and stale croissants, but now it felt different. Familiar, yes, but warmer, somehow. I arrived at 8:47 a.m., my usual seat by the window waiting, as if it had saved a place for both of us. She was already there, black coffee in hand, notebook open but untouched. She glanced up, and that soft, measured smile, the one I'd memorized in fragments over months, met mine. No words were needed. Her presence alone filled the space I hadn't realized was empty. I slid into the seat across from her, the small scrape of chair legs against the floor sounding unusually intimate. Our routine was the same, but different. The way she stirred her coffee, the slight flick of her eyes toward her hands, the pause before she answered a question, all of it carried the quiet weight of familiarity and understanding. "Morning," she said, voice low, almost a whisper, but enough. "Morning," I replied. The words felt lighter now, less charged, more ordinary, and yet somehow more intimate. We spoke in fragments, catching up on the week, errands, small mishaps, a friend's joke shared at the wrong time. Nothing monumental, nothing cinematic, just our lives brushing against each other in a rhythm we'd both grown used to. At some point, I noticed her bag left on the bench between us, the zipper slightly open, revealing a notebook with a page marked by a pressed flower. I smiled quietly. That same flower had been tucked into a page she showed me months ago, and the memory wasn't flashy or romantic, but it lingered, tethered to all the moments we'd shared. We didn't rush. We didn't touch beyond the occasional brush of elbows or the flicker of fingers near mugs. And yet, the space between us had shifted. It was no longer hesitation or longing. It was steady, earned, a quiet acknowledgement of the bridge we'd built through pauses, near misses, unsent messages, and whispered confessions. She leaned back, eyes catching the morning light, and laughed softly at something trivial. I felt the corners of my own mouth lift, and it struck me, this simple presence was what I'd been chasing. Not declarations, not grand gestures, just moments where our lives existed in the same frame, small but real. Later, we walked along the park path, the same one with the bench that had witnessed our near crossing, our pauses, our almost confessions. She carried her bag lightly, hands tucked into the coat pockets, glancing at me with that same careful warmth. I realized that we had crossed our line quietly, without drama, without a rush, and now it was permanent in its subtlety. When we parted that afternoon, it was with a soft nod and a smile that said everything we didn't need to speak aloud. And I thought, as I watched her turn a corner and disappear into the late winter sun, some things don't need fireworks to matter. Some things only need presence, persistence, and quiet attention. And as I sipped the cold coffee I'd left half drunk on our table, I realized I would always remember 8:47 a.m. The scrape of the chair, the brush of our fingers across the table. And that would be enough. Because love didn't have to shout here. It simply existed.